Yes, we need more EU workers. Yes, everyone's saying that, but believe it or not, a Tory Brexiteer is saying that. No, I'm not joking. We're going to have a look at this from The Guardian. Let's go, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an article from The Guardian. Apparently, George Eustice believes we need more EU workers. A leading Tory Brexiteer has admitted that we need more EU workers. Crazy, isn't it, when you think about it? George Eustice, the former Environment Secretary, is calling for a reciprocal visa scheme so that the under-35s can work across the EU and Britain. Well, I still think, that we could do something with all the asylum seekers that we have bottled up in our hotels and barges and that, and I don't know, help get them to work rather than keep them locked up where they are. But apparently we can't do that for some reason. Just saying. A leading Tory Brexiteer on Sunday called for ministers to reopen the UK borders to tens of thousands of young workers from EU nations in order to tackle the acute post-Brexit labour shortages that he says is driving up inflation. In an extraordinary admission of his failures of immigration policy since the UK left the EU, the former Tory Environmental Secretary George Eustice and Rishi Sunak's government should begin bilateral negotiations with EU nations immediately to view and offering to young Europeans under 35 the right to a 2-year visa to work in this country. Eustice, who was Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs under Boris Johnson, said the deal should be reciprocal so that young UK citizens under 35 will be able to live and work for 2 years in the same EU member state with which deals were struck. This, he said, would be part of a much-needed post-Brexit recolonization with our European neighbours. Now, obviously, we know that should Labour be the ones to get into power at the next general election, Keir Starmer has consistently ruled out rejoining the EU single market and rejoining the EU. And even if they were in favour of it, we know that there's no way for us to realign to join the single market or join the European Union anytime soon. We're looking at maybe 10, even 20 plus years before any kind of that serious talk or any kind of that comes around. However, we can roll back on the red tape that's been caused on us. We can reduce things on our part in order to be closer alignment with the EU. And I do believe Labour will do that. And I think it's kind of inevitable given our current situation. It's just surprising that a Tory leading Brexiteer is saying this. I think it's kind of like trying to I just feel like he's just trying to cover himself the more you think about it. And I'm curious when the general election, when we start ramping it up, what are they going to still keep saying Brexit is working? Because it's kind of a dead in the water really when you think more about it, don't you? Speaking exclusively to The Observer, Euston, who is leaving Parliament at the next election, was highly critical of the Home Office, saying its skill-based immigration rules were failing the country on many levels. Referring to the list of professions allowed to work here, he said the flaws of our current so-called skill-based immigration system are becoming clearer by the day, that we have got a policy that does not correspond to the needs of our economy. We are allowing in people who are deemed skilled workers such as lawyers, insolvent practitioners, museum officers and even disc jockeys, when we have no shortage whatsoever of those sectors. But we are not allowing people to come in work in the sectors like the food industry, even though there are acute labour shortages in this sector that is contributing to inflation. No mention of the NHS. You do need some health workers as well. So that is the big problem. My proposal is that we commence bilateral negotiations with EU member states, starting with countries like Bulgaria, Romania and the Baltic states, and wind it to the whole of the EU eventually to establish a reciprocal young youth mobility visa scheme. Okay, you want to go with the Baltic states, you don't want to talk about... Okay. Okay, well, I suppose, start with you and then build out from there. Asked if labour shortages and resulting inflationary pressures have been caused by Brexit, Eustice said, "I think we have to stop seeing everything through the prism of Brexit. This isn't because of Brexit, it is because of the failure of our post-Brexit immigration policy." You know, like the reason we have less workers is because of Brexit. It's not because of COVID or the war in Ukraine or world issues. Because otherwise, yeah, we'd be able to get those workers. So that's technically not true. Just saying. His comments, which exposed the deep splits within the Tory party over immigration, shows just how determined some ardent Brexiteers are becoming to shift Tory policy in order to try and limit the damage that leaving the EU is causing to the economy and the labour market. He blamed Theresa May when she was Prime Minister for failing to adopt a bilateral visa scheme with the EU countries after Brexit, which he said had always supported. The idea of having no temporary visa scheme was not from the Leave Vote campaign, Eustice said. It came predominantly from Theresa May. It was a Remainer interpretation of what Brexit was about. That was not what Brexit was about. People wanted controlled immigration and not to pull up on the drawbridge and allow no one in at all. Well, how's that working out for you? In May, the Home Secretary Suella Braverman told the National Conservative Conference that there was no good reason why we can't train up HGV drivers, butchers and fruit pickers in this country to fill any labour shortages. We don't have enough workers. That's why it won't work. Eustice said the Home Office misunderstood the situation and were seasonal workers who did not count towards immigration figures and they were only here for 6 months. It was important that the Tory party separated the debates about legal and illegal immigration and stopped resorting to profound, unhelpful rhetoric. Eustice, who comes from a family farm in the West Country, added that Home Office policy was pushing up immigration numbers rather than controlling them, because those allowed under the skill-based system were told that they had to settle permanently as a result or brought partners with children with them. By contrast, this visa scheme would be for individuals alone and would last for only 2 years, after which people would have to return home. 2 years just doesn't feel like a long time, in my opinion. I'm just saying, it just doesn't feels very short. 2 years. I think it should be at least maybe 5 years. Really, you really want to give them a reason to come. Like I don't know. What do you guys think on that? I think it should be 5 years personally. When the UK was a member of the EU, all UK citizens were able to travel and work freely within the EU under the freedom movement rules, but those automatic rights were extinguished by Brexit. UK citizens are now trying to work within the EU face a range of bureaucratic requirements and different rules, with some countries demanding visas and others specific job offers. Eustice, who started his political career as a member of UKIP, said his scheme, which he's planning to submit to government advisers, would mean tens of thousands of young EU workers coming to this country to fill vacancies. Labour shortages have affected mainly the food, restaurant, pubs and hospitality sector and are driving up wages and prices in the shops, accelerating the cost of living crisis. Yeah, so because, let's just remind ourselves here, so because we are filling these gaps with UK workers rather than foreign workers, EU workers, what that does is that because in order for them to fill those gaps, they had to raise the prices, to raise the wages of those sectors, which meant in turn that obviously people had to raise the prices of their bills henceforth, because people from abroad were content with the prices that they were paying at the time. So this is why it did play a factor, but obviously it's not the main factor of why we're in a cost of living crisis, but it did play a factor into that. So Brexit has played that factor into it. That's just one of many factors as to why we are paying more. Eustice said he was not calling for a return for the UK to EU freedom of movement, but for a solution to benefit Britain and its neighbours. It is really important as part of a reconciliation that we rekindle the post-Brexit friendship with our European neighbours. Last week, in a sign of growing Tory turmoil over immigration, a new group of Conservative MPs called on the government to cut special visa schemes for care workers as part of a plan to reduce immigration about 400,000 by the next general election. The proposal, backed by 20 MPs, including the allies of Braverman, were firmly rejected by Downing Street. Most EU governments would actively welcome more cross-channel mobility for young people from school groups and universities to interns and first jobbers. Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said on a visit to London in January that Berlin wanted practical EU achievements such as youth exchange programs and mobility references in Germany's new relationship with the EU. This is about looking to the future after Brexit, Baerbock said. Germany and the UK need to build new bridges in youth exchange, worker mobility, university students and research, in short, in all areas where people come together. Paris has been somewhat less forthcoming, noticeably on the possible bilateral arrangements, but France Consul General in London, Samir Mekki, said last week he had preoccupied by the new relationship between the two nations. Non-tourist travel has become much harder, especially for young people. He said, it's really difficult how to come to the UK to do a work experience placement, to be an au pair, or to just do casual work for a while. If young French and British people cannot meet each other anymore, cannot learn each other during school visits, which have become more difficult, it risks putting the two societies on diverging tracks. Yeah, that's the thing, you're diverging them from each other as well. France Europe Ministry said last month that talks on bilateral mobility issues had resumed after Sunak's visit to Paris, but warned balances must be maintained, and the Brexit TCA trade and cooperation agreement terms must be properly implemented. I know Home Office spokesperson said, we have already successfully youth mobility schemes with 10 countries, including Australia and New Zealand, and remain open to agreeing on our international partners, including EU members. We work closely with the Migration Advisory Committee to ensure our points-based system delivers for the UK and works in the best interest of the economy, including reviewing the shortage occupation list to ensure it reflects the current labour market. So, I mean, it's still like the fact that we still can't kind of be with our neighbours, that we still can't talk to them, and we're still kind of red taped. We're still red taped off, yeah, from our counterparts. Still makes things very difficult for us. But we do need more workers, and in this country, and it's pretty clear that we want them from the EU. I just think it's ironic that a Tory Brexiteer is saying this now, because they were not saying this as we were building up to the referendum campaign back in 2016. It's funny how they changed their tune when they realise just how bad things are going in the country, aren't they? But I do think along the lines of closer alignment we do need to have, and we do need to open up more to EU workers, because we're in desperate need of workers. But like I said at the start of the video, we should be doing something about doing something to those who are in barges and the asylum seekers and migrations that we have, immigrants we have. We should be putting them to work, because they don't want to be sitting in hotels and barges doing absolutely nothing with their lives either. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Like, share and subscribe as always. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you all very, very soon.